So now what we have is what we want and why we want it. Okay. Now looking at that, now in this situation, let's get really clear on what our options are. Okay? If your options are to be or not to be, and those are your only two options, we'll write those down. Right? But you might find that you have other options. So write down all the options that you can think of. But don't get too exhaustive. For example, if one option is to drive to San Francisco, and the other option is, let's just start first. If one option is to to go to San Francisco, and the other option is to go to New Mexico, right? Don't write four options. One option is to drive to San Francisco. Another option is to fly to San Francisco. Another option is to drive to New Mexico. Another option is to fly to New Mexico. No, just make the two options fly to San Francisco, go to San Francisco. The other option is go to New Mexico. And then maybe even you have a third option, go to San Francisco and New Mexico, or maybe you have a fourth. Do neither, right? You can always think about these other options. Think about how you can integrate the options that you already have. Or maybe eliminate something about these options, right? And this will be another step in our process, is basically figuring out how to mitigate the negative consequences of any option that we could choose. And this will bring up more options for us, but it's a step later along in the process, one that we're not at yet. Great. So then we figure out our options. Write them all out. And you can do that right now. I'll take a pause, and you can pause this and do that now. Now it's time to evaluate those different options, right? And part of evaluating the options is figuring out, well, what are the results of these options going to turn out to be? What are the consequences? What are the implications of these actions and these options? Okay, so for example, one of the implications or one of the consequences of going to San Francisco might be that you miss out on whatever's going on in New Mexico. And obviously the same would apply for going to New Mexico, right? These are the big ones. You're going to have to include those because they're important. You got to evaluate it on all sides, positive and negative. Those would be negative. Maybe one of the positive ones is that by going to San Francisco, you're going to an amazingly influential gathering with people from all over the world gathering together to discuss ways to innovate the business that you're in. That might be a really important thing to do. So you can evaluate, well, what's the probability that this will actually be an important event that, will be the way that it's advertised? And maybe you're a little conservative about it, so you write 6 or 7, right? You're not totally sure, but there's a strong possibility that it will be everything that you want it to be. And if it is, then the good consequence of that will be a 10, right? So you write down a 10. You can do the same sort of thing for New Mexico. I'm going to keep this brief, right? Because you can figure these things out for yourself. So great. Now you have these things laid out. Or, let me give you a minute in order to lay these out for yourself. To write them all out and get them all on your paper. So think of all the positive consequences of choosing one option, and think of all the negative consequences of choosing that option, and basically evaluate those. Say what on a scale between 1 and 10, how good is it? How bad is it? And also, what's the probability that it will happen? So, for example, the probability that something's going to be the probability if something is going to be a 10, but it has a probability of 2, well, it's a lot less of a good option than something that has the good factor of 6, but has a probability of 10. Because then you're going to get 6, where you might only get 0 if you choose the one with a lower probability, right? So these are factors that help you make your decision. So make those now. Next, we're going to go through all of our options, and we're going to begin to see ones which we can just cross right off our list. They don't make any sense to us, right? And again, here, you're not going to get everything, right? Sometimes you can make more fit than others, but you're not going to get everything. And again, knowing what you want, knowing what your values are, knowing who you want to be, what you want to stand for, and what your purpose on earth is a really helpful way in order to really evaluate what you want and what you don't want, right? And we're not going to go over that today, but that's something that you should definitely do, and something that I'll cover in another day. Because if you don't have that figured out, well then, you're always going to struggle with making these decisions, and you're going to find no easy place of real competence to just know, without thinking about it too much, what you want to do and what you don't want to do. Because some decisions are a lot harder than others, but they're all easy when we know who we are and we can access our full capacity for creative solution and creative strategy. So let's think right now about which ones we can just eliminate right off the bat. We'll go through them, we'll think, oh, well, this is just a terrible option. Considering my other ones, I don't need that. And of course, the other ones aren't going to seem perfect now, but that's okay. Just go with the ones that seem like the best. We're going to deal with how to make them better in a minute. So do that now. Great. So now you should have some options on the table, and you should have some eliminated, right? Or maybe if you don't have very many options, then you won't have any eliminated, but now you're going to deal with this next spot. And this next part is about mitigating the negative consequences of your possible options, right? So what you want to do is you want to go through any negative consequence of these options that you have in front of you and think to yourself, is there any way I could possibly avoid that negative consequence? Is there anything else that I can do? Are there any other options that are like this one, but they don't have that same negative result, which I don't want? See if you can think of anything. Now you really have to tap into any resources that you might have. And this is another thing that's extremely important to do while you start making decisions or before you even start to make a decision. And I apologize for putting it on so late here. But it's basically to get resourceful. And what that means is that if you're in a state of crying, moping, and feeling totally helpless, well, you know what? You're not going to be able to make a decision because you're going to be helpless. But you got to get yourself into a strong place of certainty. So start thinking to yourself of when you've made hard decisions like this one, and you've made them well, and everything turned out right. Or maybe it didn't turn out right, but at least you were satisfied and you were able to fix things later. Or at least you didn't have all the pain and struggle of having to sit on the fence for days and weeks and months not knowing what you're going to do, because I guarantee you one thing, you make that decision, you commit to it, and it's the wrong decision, you'll figure it out pretty quickly, and you'll be able to change directions. It is impossible to move a ship in port, but guess what? When the ship is moving, you can change any direction you want. And that's what we need to realize. We need to realize we got to just start moving. We got to get the ball rolling. And once the ball's rolling, then with that momentum, we can start to shape things. Right? But that's our first step, to get this ball rolling. And I'll join you in a minute for our next segment. But think right now about what resources you have to deal with whatever options you're dealing with right now, and how you can mobilize all the support necessary for yourself. All right, I'll join you for the next one.